Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So what we're going to go through today is I'm going to show you 5 hip exercises that will instantly improve the flexibility and mobility of your hips, which is fantastic if you suffer from low back pain, any hip dysfunction, pelvic pain, sacroiliac joint pain, and even knee pain. Any of those sorts of issues can be affected by a more central restriction or a rusty segment that sort of filters dysfunction sort of out and about around it. So hopefully with these 5 exercises, you'll have a comprehensive system of things to do to instantly improve your hip range of motion, and hopefully you'll see some improvements in those issues as well. So the first exercise we're going to go through, and I should add too, for most of the exercises, we're going to use a power band. They're fantastic. I'll leave a link in the description just so you can see what they look like. You can get them from any sporting goods store, online, they're everywhere. But they're fantastic for improving the joint mobility of the hip. So we're going to utilize that today. So initially, the first exercise that we're going to do is we're going to go through the couch stretch. But we're going to add a few things to it above what we normally do. But before we get to that, we want to give ourselves a frame of reference. So as we like to do with any exercise is, we want to do a few squats or a few movements to begin with to get a sense of how comfortable things feel, get a sense of how deep we can go on both sides, whether you feel like you're going to roll backwards and fall over, just a general idea of the quality of your movement so that when you do these exercises, you can then repeat that same movement and see those instant changes. Because as we always say, and as I always tell my patients, if you haven't seen change, there's a very real possibility that you haven't made change. So we always want to make sure that any stretch that you do gives you instant gains in your flexibility. Otherwise, you may not be doing the right thing, or it's just not the right exercise for you. So the first exercise that we're going to touch on is this couch stretch. Now, when we have a band, we want to get the band right up into that hip crease. And we're going to take the knee all the way back up against a wall if possible. And again, as we know mostly with this exercise, the shin's vertical, foot's pointing upwards. But what we want to try and do is, to start with, we want to try and push that hip to the ground. We're trying to increase the ability to extend the hip by pushing it to the ground. And we want to make sure that we squeeze those glutes as we push. You should feel a really powerful tugging at the front of that hip because we're trying to get into that hip capsule, the joint capsule, the deeper structure. Now, depending on your mobility, you can do this with your knee up onto a seat or a couch, as the name implies. The better you are at this, the more upright you should be able to come. So for me, because I do this a little bit, I still feel quite tight here, but I'm also getting a stretch to the front of the quads. We want to make sure that those hips aren't tilted to one side. We want to make sure you're pretty much in line with your shin and your thigh are lined up together. And then what we want to do in this position, while the glute's still squeezed, is to take a deep breath in, and then squeeze everything. Squeeze the glutes, squeeze the front of the hip, tense everything up for 5 seconds, push the foot back into the wall or the back of the chair, and then relax. And you should feel like you can come up a little bit higher. So with any of these stretches, we want to maneuver around to feel where your tightness is. And for me, I feel a little bit more tight in this position, so I'm just going to hang out here for a little bit. Same thing, take a deep breath in, squeeze, and then relax and see how you feel. Now with this exercise, what you can do is you can rotate your body towards the side that you're on. This puts you in more sort of internal rotation of the hip, and you might feel a little bit more in the groin, but we just want to see where you feel you can find some tightness. And we also want to go the other way as well, into more sort of relative external rotation, just to see where your tightness is. And for me, there's a little bit of tightness here as well. So I'm going to breathe in, squeeze, hold for 5 seconds, and then relax. And then once we come out of that, what you'll hopefully see here, and what you'll hopefully feel, is when you squat down, it feels like I've got more room to move in this position. And that's what we're looking for. So that's stretch number 1. The second stretch we're going to go through is the hip joint capsule stretch. So again, we want the band right up in that hip crease, but this time we're going to be on all 4s. So what we're looking for here is, because I'm doing this leg closest to the camera, I just want to take the other leg back, the opposite leg back. I want to make sure I'm nice and parallel to the ground and keeping my shoulders and my hips together. I'm just going to move or shift my body weight closer to the camera. And what I'm trying to do here is get my thigh bone to press out the back corner of my hip. And And what you should hopefully find is, you might need to come over the top or down low a little bit. You should be able to find a position where you can feel a comfortable pressure in this position. And we just want to hang out here for a little bit. We want to let that joint capsule open up a little bit, stretch a little bit, some of that restriction go away. And once we've done this for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, you want to do all of these exercises for 30 seconds to a minute. You can do 2 minutes aside if you really feel like you need it. But once you've done about 30 seconds here, what we want to do with that same leg is we want to bias different parts of the joint capsule in the joint itself. So this time we're going to rotate the foot under, drop the back leg down to block that, and we're going to repeat the same thing. We're going to come back over to the side, everything's going to move as a unit, and we're going to hunt around and try and find some tightness. And for me now, it should be a little bit further towards the back pocket. Same thing, we want to camp out here, hang out here for a few seconds. So we get another 30 seconds, see how this feels. You can take a deep breath in, squeeze, tense your glutes, hit the tissue over the top of the capsule, and then when you relax, it should be a tiny little bit easier. And then the third part of this stretch is we're going to unhook the foot, and we're going to go after the internal rotation of the hip. So this time we're going to rotate the foot outwards. So without your hips and back bending, we're stay nice and integrated. We just want to rotate that hip out until you feel like you hit the end of your range, plant the foot, and then we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to come back across to that side, looking for some tightness or some pressure, and this time instead of it being at the back or at the side, it should hopefully be a little bit more around the front corner of that hip. Same thing again, we just want to hang out here. So we're trying to get that hip joint capsule to stretch. Often when we sit, this capsule gets stiff, and it's just it's a root cause of so many issues that we have in terms of aches and pains with the back and the tissue around it. All right, I'm going to come out of that, and then again, just to retest it again. So we're always doing this side. What you hopefully see again is as I come down, I just feel like I sink down a lot lower, sort of on that side. I feel more integrated. It just feels a lot nicer. So, so that's exercise number 2. Now, the third exercise, again, we're going to go after your ability to bend your hip sort of past 90 degrees. We know when we sit a lot, we're often stuck in this 90-degree position a lot. We don't often get into positions where we take that hip sort of past that full range of motion. Like a lot of things, we tend to lose it. So again, this time, the band is going to go right up into the corner of that hip again. This might be a bit weird on camera. So we're right at the top here. I'm just going to get you to bend forward. So you can do it with the band pointing out to the side. I'll do that a little bit just so I'm not poking my butt at the camera. But the idea here is that the band's pulling back, and we're just trying to improve the ability to bend forward through that hip. So what we want to do here is, depending on what you feel comfortable with, you don't have to touch the ground, but we want to close that hip joint down, poke your bottom out, and try and lift it off sort of separate it from your leg. What we're looking for is that hip crease where your bum meets the top of your thigh. We want to try and target that position as best as you feel comfortable. So you might need to swing your hip to one side, swing your hip to the other side. You might need to rotate a little bit, but we're looking for where you can find the best access to that tightness at that hip crease. And again, this is a great way to really open up some tissue, have a conversation with some tissue that you probably haven't had a conversation with for a while. It definitely looks awkward, it looks weird, but the whole point of it is that you should see an instant change in your ability to bend and flex that hip. And how that looks after about 30 seconds. Same thing again on this side. As we squat down, it just instantly feels looser. Now this right one doesn't, for me, this right hand side, I think because the camera's reversed, it just feels tighter, but when I can just settle a lot better down through this area. So again, you should feel an immediate difference in your ability to bend your hip, get your knee to your chest in that position. So that's exercise number 3. Now the next one is we're going to do the same thing again, but this time we're going to go for the groin itself. So we actually want to go through the other direction this time. So we're going to have you facing this way, but the band's pulling in the same direction. But this time we're going to do the traditional groin stretch. So I think you can see there, it is hooked around sort of that hip crease. So traditionally we know we have these these groin stretches that we do traditionally where we're cross-legged trying to push them down. But if you just have your legs out as wide as you feel comfortable, you can see this here. So all I'm going to try and do, squeeze my bum. I'm just going to go off to the side. And then what I want you to do here is just come around that sort of 90-degree range and just feel where your best access to some groin tightness is. So having the band pulling this way, as your leg goes out, the hip joint itself should sort of roll forwards or towards the camera. So as that leg comes out, the hip joint should come forwards to keep that sort of integration in the system. So having the band from the back pulling forwards is a great way to really buy some of the joint stiffness or the capsular stiffness at the front. You're going to get some adductor groin muscle tightness and tendon tightness as well. But the point is that you can scour that range to feel where your best position is. For me, I like this position here. So I'm just going to squeeze everything, squeeze my glutes, squeeze my groin, push my heel into the ground, get those muscles to flare up. And then again, we can probably move a little bit further the second time. So spend another 30 seconds in this position, trying to find where it feels tight and stiff, squeezing the muscles, relaxing, and then afterwards making sure that when you do a squat, we're looking at how this feels on the way down. So again, getting my knee out, not sure if you can see that compared to this side, it just feels a lot freer because I've opened up that sort of inside corner of my hip. So anyone who has groin issues, again, pelvic floor stuff, there's a whole bunch of reasons why that groin gets tight, but using a band is a fantastic way to free that up. So they're 4 banded exercises. Now you can use anything similar to a band. If you have TheraBands or TheraTubing, those stretchy exercise bands are still fantastic. You just want something that has some strong resistance you can hook into the joint and pull that joint apart and bias that capsular stiffness. Now the 5th exercise, we're going to use our trusty lacrosse ball. You can use a tennis ball, baseball, golf ball, anything that you feel is the right size, shape and density to hit your spots. What we're going to go after is we're going to go after a piece of the hip that's neglected a lot. It's the TFL. It sort of attaches to the front of your hip bone and attaches into the ITB that runs down the leg. It gets very, very tight when we sit a lot, but it also restricts, I guess, the mobility at the hip. So the way to find that is if you can find your hip bone at the side, we're just going to get you to come forward to that. And how that looks is with the ball, and again, hopefully you can see this, is we're going to get the ball into the front of the hip. We're going to have to roll to the side just to get that corner, that front corner. And we're going to have a look around from the front of that hip bone back towards the hip bone itself in that sort of quadrant of the hip. And what we can do here is once you've found a spot, so for me I found a little bit of a tightness through here, we can get you to turn your foot and your whole leg inwards and outwards. We're trying to rotate that hip. So we're using a tack and floss exercise. We're trying to pin down the tightness and then twist your leg forwards and backwards to try and shear that tightness free. The other thing you can do is you can try and sort of roll around on top of it, but it's much better if you keep some constant pressure or constant pressure and movement. They're the things that we need to look for. And then again, once you've done that, you want to make sure that when you squat again, and hopefully you can, if you rewind the tape, you'll hopefully see the difference here, is that right side for me now just feels light and free. And now it's not perfect, and obviously I need to free up a few other things. My ankle's a little bit stiff, but my ability to sit in this position feels a lot more comfortable. On the right hand side, it just doesn't feel as mobile. So obviously spending some time on that side as well, that would be a really good idea. So if you're looking to improve the mobility of your hip, again, a power band is fantastic to try and sort of breach that rusty, stiff hip that you probably had for a long time. And then a lacrosse ball can help you sort of figure out a lot of the muscular tightness around the edges. So you can put it into your glutes, you can put it through your hip flexor, up through into your abs as well if they get a bit tight. But I'd highly recommend giving, at the very least, 1 or 2 of those hip stretches a go, making sure that you do some squats before and afterwards, or any other, hip, knee, back movement just to see how it feels. Because if you don't see an immediate difference, then you haven't quite done the exercise the right way, or you're not quite hitting the right parts. So it's important that you feel that change just to justify the effort that you put in. So as always, if you like the content, please leave a like below. please consider subscribing, particularly if you're new, just so that you can get these videos as they come out. We always want to make sure that the content we're putting out reflects what we talk about in clinic. So if you come in to see us, you'll have similar conversations to these. These exercises sort of represent the kind of things that we can do to improve you immediately, whether that be pain, function, sports performance, injury prevention, everything together. So hopefully there's some use there. And I'd appreciate if you do enjoy the video or you do find it useful, please share it. Let more people see this content. But again, hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. We've got a few daily videos coming up. Any questions, let us know in the comments. But until then, we'll see you later.